sectors up close. I'm Elena Casas. Our focus today is on healthcare, and my guest is John Stoltzfus, Chief Investment Strategist at Oppenheimer Asset Management. Markets are sinking around the world this Tuesday after the CEO of Moderna set off fresh alarm bells by saying there's no world where the company's current vaccine will be as effective against the Omicron variant as it is against Delta. Pharmaceutical companies, though, are already hard at work on an Omicron vaccine. Pfizer and Moderna say they're studying whether Omicron is able to evade the protection of the existing vaccines and accelerating development of new shots designed to target the variant. Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla said an updated vaccine could be available in less than 100 days, while President Biden promised to help accelerate that process on Monday.
So that we are prepared if needed. My team is already working with officials at Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson & Johnson to develop contingency plans for vaccines or boosters if needed. And I will also direct the FDA and the CDC to use the fastest process available without cutting any corners for safety to get such vaccines approved and on the market if needed.
That's given some investors added confidence in the vaccine makers. Pfizer and Moderna have risen in recent days as the US and European countries encourage people to fight the variant by getting a booster shot. Overall, the S&P 500 healthcare index is up 16% this year. That lags the wider index since the pandemic has kept people away from the kind of routine or elective healthcare treatments that are the bread and butter of health insurers and medical device companies. So, what's next for the healthcare sector? To find out, I'm now joined by John Stoltzfus, Chief Investment Strategist at Oppenheimer Asset Management. Hi John, thanks for joining us. So what does the constant evolution of the virus mean for vaccine makers and the pharmaceutical companies who are trying to develop drugs for COVID?
Well, thanks for having me on the show, Elena. Must say that related to what's going on right now is the drug companies are really trying to get a handle on where they stand relative to this new variant that has been discovered in South Africa and is spread to several countries. The thought is here that it will take some time, but the wonderful thing is if you put it in context of the pandemic, we already know that there are vaccines that one can achieve that have great efficacy against these things. So it's a question of modeling the virus, and we expect they'll come up with a solution. Lastly, I just have to say on this thought is that we're really moving from pandemic towards endemic, or something that has to be dealt with on a cyclical basis, much like the traditional flu that we know. That's what we believe.
The pandemic has really shown that both vaccines and antiviral drugs can be developed much more quickly and rolled out much more globally than we thought that they could in the past. So what does this mean for pharmaceutical firms going forward?
Well, we think it means that there will be greater interest by investors as we move forward, as things get established to deal with this pattern that has come out of the pandemic. We do believe, however, that the sector has certain impediments to it. One is it's highly subject to regulation, litigation, high cost of finding new solutions to problems in healthcare. But the more we get to manage the health challenges that we have today that are related to COVID-19 and to any variants like this, the more we can get back to the next, or get towards the next new normal.
You mentioned, of course, the role of regulators here. Outside the US, the main client for healthcare companies really is governments. Do you think that the more close way that they've worked together with pharmaceutical firms during the coronavirus can give investors more confidence in the sector going forward?
We have to think that, we've seen a real move in the US for the government working with the companies rather than leading in terms of the response, in terms of government experimentation and research. So it is in the private sector that we're seeing the real advancements here. And we think going forward, the pattern that will develop will likely be the result of what succeeds most. And it so far looks like the private sector really is where the leadership comes from, but it needs the support of governmental agencies related to distribution, first approval, and then the process of distribution and support.
What about healthcare companies whose work isn't directly benefited by the pandemic, like medical device companies and those that rely on people going for routine and elective healthcare, a lot of which was postponed by the pandemic? Is that starting to start again?
Yeah, we've seen quite a bit of that, just locally in New York, but across the country and around the world. As soon as the population begins to feel more comfortable with day-to-day activities, the next thing is to deal with all those maladies or the elective type surgeries that they had postponed during the pandemic. So it expands the business for the healthcare sector, whether it is pharmaceutical, biotechnology, whether it is diagnostic, whether it is insurers, or whether it is the hospitals themselves.
How do you think investors should play the healthcare sector going forward then?
I think probably the best way that we would suggest for investors to consider would be one in which, if they have large enough portfolios, to do a mix of individual securities with ETFs or exchange traded funds that focus on the sector. So it could be the utilization, let's say, of an S&P 500 healthcare sector ETF, along with a equal weighted biotechnology sector and perhaps a large cap market weighted biotechnology sector. There are also other sectors that specialize in other areas of healthcare, but we'd also suggest that when you think about healthcare, the wonderful thing is it utilizes other sectors, including industrials and materials in particular. When you think of the materials, bringing them chemicals, and when it comes to the industrials, all kinds of technology-driven machinery and equipment, and of course add tech to that.
Thanks so much for that insight. That was John Stoltzfus, Chief Investment Strategist at Oppenheimer Asset Management. Well, before I go, here's a look at some of the other headlines in the sector. An FDA panel will vote later today on whether to recommend Merck's antiviral pill to treat coronavirus, despite data showing it only reduced hospitalizations and deaths by 30%. The molnupiravir pills are likely to be authorized anyway. They target parts of the virus that are not changed by mutations in the Omicron variant, unlike Regeneron's antibody cocktail, which the company says could be less effective against Omicron. The European Union's drug regulator says it could approve vaccines designed to target the Omicron variant within 3 to 4 months. The EMA said it was preparing for vaccine makers to adapt their formulations, but the shots we have will continue to provide protection. And France is to become the first EU country to vaccinate children under 12, but for the moment only those with an underlying health condition. The EMA gave its green light to the Pfizer shot for 5 to 11-year-olds on Friday, but France will initially only give it to about 364,000 vulnerable children. The US has made all children in that age group eligible. And that's your roundup of the healthcare sector. I'm Elena Casas, and this is Reuters.